Welcome back to another episode of Offbeat Adventures. We're standing again here on the grade of the former Canadian Northern Railway and later Canadian National Railways, Dorian, and then subsequently Kinghorn subdivision. We are just north of Nipigon, just south of where Parmachene Station was, and we're leaving off right where we did on a previous hike. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working our way from this kind of unnamed road here that runs through this area here, and then we're going to be working our way to the south, right towards Nipigon, and basically ending up where we did a previous hike. One of the things that I'm going to mention for today is that we are going to have a little bit of an issue with the sun. I picked this day to do this hike because it was supposed to be cloudy, and it's been kind of cloudy off and on, but not necessarily to my liking. The problem with this is that the grade in this area heads in a southeast direction, so basically right into the sun. And we really needed it to be cloudy today, but unfortunately it's not necessarily cooperating with us. So this is our first kind of a little stop here. There's going to be lots of culverts on this section. It's a very, very busy section. This first little bit's kind of quiet, but then it gets a little bit crazy with the amount of embankments and culverts that are down there. So we have a mileage marker here, and so it kind of gives you an idea of where we are right now. So that says 122.58. So again, that is the mileage on the Kinghorn. And so for the original entities, the Canadian Northern Railway Nipigon subdivision and the Canadian National Railways Dorian subdivision, we need to subtract 49.7 miles. And so that becomes 122.78. So that gives us a little bit better idea of our mileage. So here we go. We're going to just start pushing our way southeast here. It is a decent day. It's the wind is a little chilly. Again, I picked this day because it was supposed to be cloudy. So I'm going to try to keep my head kind of turned a little bit to the right here, because again, it is very problematic. We just passed another culvert there. I've looked at so many culverts today that I don't know, I've lost count, because I'm always looking for the older style kind of concrete ones, and so I've been up and down the side of embankments a bazillion times, it feels like. All right, so and we've also had kind of a really interesting experience. So my phone decided it was going to call 911 on me. And so I had a nice little conversation. I couldn't stop it before it actually started ringing. So then I got a phone call from the dispatch center and had a nice pleasant conversation with the lady there, telling her that no, I am not in trouble, and that my phone in the holder, I guess, decided to push the home button and decided to dial 911. Never had that happen for me before. All right, so while we have a minute here, we can do our usual history lesson. So this line was built by Canadian Northern Railway between 1911 and 1914, and this was going to be one of the final pieces in Canadian Northern's transcontinental line. You see we're kind of, there's a few grown in sections here. People have been kind of cutting back the brush a little bit. And so Canadian Northern, back around the turn of the century, so between 1899 and 1902, had built one of their first pieces of line west from the then city of Port Arthur, which is now the city of Thunder Bay, towards Winnipeg. And then they began building lines throughout the prairies. And then a few years later, they started building north from Toronto up into the Sudbury area. We're going to stop here because we're not going to take a look at it. There's a few other good ones here, but there's a telegraph pole right through the right in through there. So they had built up into the Sudbury area, and so this was basically going to be a link. This was going to be one of the final connections between that piece of line near Sudbury, Ruel to be specific, and then Port Arthur. Now, Canadian Northern was very, very hesitant about building this piece of line, simply because they knew that it was going to be extremely expensive to build it. And unfortunately, their hand was kind of forced, and if they wanted to see their railway become sort of viable, they had to do the construction. And again, it was going to be very, very expensive to do so. We're going to pull up here for a second again. There's another telegraph pole. You can see there is one green insulator still on there. There's a Brookfield or a Hemingway. It's broken, so unfortunately that's why it hasn't been taken by any of the collectors. And so again, this line was finished in January 1st, 1914. The line was completed and was open for traffic in 1950. Now, unfortunately, shortly thereafter, Canadian Northern started running into financial difficulties. And by 1917, they were basically almost in receivership. And so a year later in 1918, Canadian Northern basically was forced by the government, completely taken over by the Canadian government, and forced to amalgamate or merge with a bunch of other Canadian government owned bankrupted railways known as the Canadian Government Railways. And so they came together to form what became known as Canadian National Railways. And that process was completed 5 years later in 1923, when the Grand Trunk lines were brought into the fold. And the name of this line changed. It went from the Canadian National Railways, Canadian Northern Railway Nipigon subdivision to the Canadian National Railways Dorian subdivision. And it remained as such until 1960, when it was merged with the more easterly Kinghorn subdivision, and then became the entire length became the Kinghorn subdivision. And then in 2005, Canadian National decided to discontinue service on this line, and eventually by 2010, all the rails were ripped up. So what we have here is we enter this spot here, and I was a little worried about this spot because on some of the Google Earth images, it looks like it was flooded from a couple of years ago, and maybe it was at that time. It isn't right now. You can see the mileage marker, the milepost marker. So 123, and again, that's the mileage on the Kinghorn. And so for the original lines, that would be 73.3. And so I'll just kind of walk you through to the end of this spot here. Little bits of insulator here. Again, the beavers are always kind of very active. And you can see that, I mean, just looking at this, you know, it's kind of wet, and especially up here, I'm guessing that this was at some point underwater within the last couple of years. So maybe that Google Earth image that I saw was very true. You can see like all of the debris. So maybe somebody has come through and basically bust the beaver dam and remove the flooding here. But definitely, I've seen this on many occasions with other railway lines before, particularly the Port Arthur, Duluth, and Western. And this is definitely a flooded section. This was underwater at some point. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to jump back up on the bike, and we're just going to continue pushing our way to the south here.